Hello friends, so welcome to this lecture on access control, or we can say access management in case of Azure SQL database. So we'll see that okay, what are the different options we have in case of access control. So in this lecture we'll study this particular portion where we'll discuss about the SQL Server authentication, Azure AD authentication, and row level security, and the dynamic data masking. So in case of SQL database particularly supports two type of authentication. One is we call it as SQL authentication, and the second is Azure AD authentication or Azure Active Directory authentication. So in case of with the SQL authentication, basically refers to the authentication of user when connecting to the Azure SQL databases using a username and a password. So basically, when you create your SQL database using the PowerShell or using the commandlets or using the Azure portal, then there you provide the username and the password for your SQL database. So during the creation itself, those particular credentials or those particular user which you have created, we call it as that it uses the SQL authentication, or you can say the admin user which you have created for the first time, and that is we call it as the server level principal account for your SQL database, with the help of which you'll be able to connect. And using this credential, a server admin can authenticate to any database on that database server as the database owner. So you can see this snapshot when you click on that database. If you'll go to the properties option, you'll see what I'm talking about, the username and the password we have. So we'll see that in a demo as well. So remember, in this particular thing, we are not doing the problem in case of SQL authentication is there is no centralized management of the users or the basically the server admin which you have created. So you need to manually manage the credentials and all those things. So and it is really a good option or a security best practice to have the centralized management of your privileged users. And to solve this problem, there is a feature in case of Azure. We can say it is as Azure AD authentication. And Azure AD authentication basically uses to manage uses identities managed by the Azure Active Directory and is supported for your manage and your integrated domains as well. And really, to use the Azure AD authentication, you need to enable that server admin in case of when once you have created your SQL databases. So what you are doing over here is when you're doing the Azure AD authentication, basically you are creating a second level uh, or a second server level principal account, which we call it as Azure admin. So in SQL authentication, it was server admin only, and where we say that okay, it will be a Azure AD admin, which will be basically used to administer your Azure AD user groups. And similarly, this Azure admin can also create any databases, number of databases within your SQL server, like the server admin. The only difference here is the management is will be done by using the Azure Active Directory, and there will be a centralized management to centralized management for the your privileged user or for your Azure admin. And basically, it provides an alternative to your SQL Server authentication, and you can use it, allow password rotation in a single pace. So all these things you can do it. So these are the two options we have: SQL Server authentication and AD authentication for your database authentication. And next we have is the application access. So for application security or access, we have the first option is row level security, and the second is dynamic data masking. See, row level security simplifies basically the design and the coding of security in your application. So with row level security, you can helps customer to enable control access to rows in a database table on like the user executing a query. So basically, think from a perspective that okay, there is an database administrator, and in all the rows and columns, the data is there. But you want that okay, the when the user will be running a query, or when the user will be performing a function, he the row which contains some sensitive data, maybe there are certain rows which contains the information about the salary structure of your CEO, and you don't want that, okay, your database administrator or certain users, they are not that data is not visible when they are running a query. So in that case, row level security is a very good feature to to secure or to encrypt the data which is stored in case of at a particular row. And another example is to restrict customer data access only to the to only the data relevant to their company, not the other data. So in that case, you'll be able to encrypt the data and make sure that, okay, data is not visible to others for which they don't require access. The second option we have is the dynamic data masking. So dynamic data masking basically limits the sensitive data exposure by making it by masking it to the non-privileged user. So remember a couple of times when you access or do a shopping from Amazon, and they share your credit card number, or while you're doing online recharge, so couple of digits of your credit card is masked and only last four digits are visible to you. So that is because that information is hide or obfuscated. So that is, we called it as, that information is masked. So data masking is basically done to protect personally identifiable information or some sensitive information, so that the person who actually doesn't need the access to data, or the developer which is doing a query to the production environment for only troubleshooting purposes, so we should not be providing access to the to those kind of data. And another example is the dynamic data masking is, for example, you are in one of the healthcare industry, and you are having your databases onto Azure. And since, see, remember, you are using a PaaS platform, and by default, when the developers will be running a query, they'll be able to see the data, and you don't want that a support person should be able to see the data. You need to hide certain columns, let's say user email addresses or some personal data, personal information. Like, there are requirements from the GDPR that, okay, personal data, PI information should not be lost, right? So in that case, in order to secure such kind of data, that data can be masked. So there are different options in case of Azure, that, okay, which field, which information you want to mask, and how you want to mask, right? So dynamic data masking is like, will mask that information, mask that sensitive information to comply with all those regulations and without violating any law. So these are the options we have in case of SQL, by securing the data with help of row level security or doing the dynamic data masking. So this is it. In this lecture, we studied about the database authentication using the SQL authentication and Azure AD authentication, and then in case of application access, we discussed how we can implement the row level security to secure the data at a particular row or a sensitive data at a row, and then the dynamic data masking to hide or obfuscate the basically sensitive data. So this is it in this lecture. Thank you for watching this lecture. Meet you in the next lecture.